Now we're gonna get the image on the screen here pretty good. And you know what? Leave the lights up. I don't.
No, we have to see it.
Well, it's okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, again, thank you for letting this North American interloper join in this European cinema study group. It is a great honor and pleasure, and I've learned so much already. And I think that we're going to find that there's a lot that art house cinema exhibitors in the States and art house exhibitors in Europe have in common. So Ann Arbor is a college town that's 70 kilometers from Detroit, 280 kilometers from Chicago, and 440 kilometers from Toronto. It's in the middle of the country. The current condition is that our paying customers are increasing, but we're well below, about 45% below pre-pandemic levels of sales. The educated older audiences are substantially afraid of attending, and we'll see other statistics across the United States that show that that's a trend. And younger audiences are definitely showing up, but they're less prepared when you ask them for a vaccination proof. And there's a militant minority, not just of young people, but of everyone, that kind of against mask wearing in the States. Community partnerships and philanthropic gifts are what carried the Michigan and State Theater through the pandemic. There isn't much government funding of the arts in the United States. The substitute for that is private philanthropy, mostly from individuals, but businesses and corporations. But most gifts that come from individuals. And so that really saw us through the pandemic. Folks paid their membership fees, which is kind of a subscription to our programs, and also just added to their regular donations. So folks and businesses that weren't contributing because they were impaired, the money that we lost there, we made up in terms of other generous folks that supported what we're doing. There was an unprecedented level of funding, as there was in Europe, because of the pandemic, and that was a blessing and a surprise, but it has put most cinemas and live on stage theaters in pretty good financial shape to emerge from the pandemic. The attendance, if you look here, the yellow line at the top is 2019. The gray is 2020, or you can see where it fell off, and then 2021 is the orange, red-orange. So you can see for about a year, people weren't going to the movies, starting in March, April of 2020 and through March, April 2021. This year is in blue, and it's looking a little bit more normal, but some of the peak times when you expected things to go up in January and February, because of Omicron, they were down. The other graph there are the live on stage shows. We do a lot of various kinds of live on stage shows as well. So that's the condition of the pandemic, which makes partnerships extremely important. The independent art house exhibitors in the United States have essentially the same attitude and difficulty with Hollywood that Europe does. So that's not true for the commercial exhibitors, but it is for art house cinemas. So the way that you feel about the way American commercial cinema really clobbers and is a really unfair competitor to European cinema, to independent cinema, documentary, and classic cinema. We feel that same way in terms of the independent and art house exhibitors. COVID-19 did kind of free up a little bit, didn't require 7-day runs. They did distribute things to art house theaters that they typically wouldn't do. So that increased flexibility was a nice piece that came from the studios and from distribution. The independent distributors had the same kind of financial stress on them that the theaters did, and I'm sure this was true for smaller European distributors as well. Their business went down, and they were very flexible in terms of streaming. The independent distributors were very flexible in terms of allowing streaming, setting up systems that allow streaming to happen, and we did a lot of that during the pandemic. There's no formal and consistent pipeline from U.S. festivals to theaters. There's a small amount of short films that are distributed, but not too much in terms of mainstream or regular programming that comes from the festivals. Kind of a surprise given all the important festivals in the States, but there just really isn't that kind of thing. The essential commercial nature of cinema distribution results in a kind of weak program partnership because everything is really money, 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 money. More so, I think, in the States than pretty much anywhere else. There's certain advantages to that, but there's also a great deal of, there's a disadvantage to that, especially if you're an art house or independent exhibitor. The thing that we have in the States, I think, is that we don't even appreciate is the really tremendous flexibility that we have in programming. So there isn't a focus on national cinema. Not really a surprise because you can't swing a dead cat without hitting an American film. So we don't, that is a pretty bad joke for sure. But it creates a lot of benefit in terms of flexibility. So we're not looking to provide X amount of space for American films or American independent films or any particular kind of films. Although, we certainly have done a lot of exchange programs with European countries, with Europa Cinema and other folks. But it's not a mandate. So it just creates a lot of flexibility. And generally, and this is probably true all over the world, that people think of cinema because there's movie stars and there's millionaires that come out of it, that it's basically a commercial business. But I think that that's extremely strong in the United States. On the news on Monday, they report the grosses of the films for that weekend, which is like, who cares in terms of the mainstream public? They never talk about the quality of films, just how much money they took in. So I think that says a lot. The way that programming developed and the partnerships that developed with the distributors during the pandemic, classic films are pretty much available. So if there were any fetters on that, if there were any limitations on that, those got lowered a bit with the studios. They allowed Blu-ray screenings if they didn't have prints and things like that. Comedies, musicals, anime are proving to be very popular, and I'm wondering if that's kind of a flashback to a Depression era. Got it. Screening kind of dynamic. And art houses have lost about 60% of their business if they're pursuing the same kind of programming they did before the pandemic. And it's 40 or 50% are lost if the art houses have started to do more commercial product. But you're thinking, are they selling their soul? We're one of those theaters that may be selling our soul. This is an audience outlook monitor that was done nationally. And I think there's three important points that come out of this. People who are staying home are even more worried than before about, and they're delaying their return to the theaters. And the last highlighted area, which means that 15 to 20% of the market may not come back at all. They've either aged out or their fear is just so great that they're just not going to show up. But the most interesting thing is that only half of non-returners cite health concerns. But what they do cite is, if you look in the lower left-hand corner, right-hand corner, not yet found programming I want to attend. So, these are the various months, but the green is I haven't found programming that I want to attend. And the red is that you know, they're just cautious about what it is that they want to do, but they'll definitely come back. But I thought that that was really interesting, that there's a whole bunch of people that are using the excuses they don't like the programming or there's nothing interesting to them. And that's the largest part of that graph. It's the largest area. The partnerships between festivals and theaters is rather weak. Distribution is really this kind of a more commercial piece, but the smaller distributors, I think, are closer to the way that European distributors relate to theaters. Not a perfect relationship, but a certain kind of flexibility. But the things that I think that we have to worry about in the States and probably worldwide is that there's a certain percentage, the estimate of 15 to 20%, that are so irrationally afraid of coming back to public places that they may never come back. Plus, with the amount of time, there's just people that age out. Art houses, audiences have lost the habit of going. I know that we see this just in terms of the flux of attendance. You have a string of really popular movies and people get in the habit of coming, and then things turn in a way that are less popular, or the season is a motivation not to come, and then attendance falls off, and then it takes quite a while to ramp back up. And that's just in the normal cycle of how things are programmed. But this is rather profound, and I think that that notion of not having programs that they want to see is part of that articulation. Programming trends we talked about: repertory theater, depression era escapism, and the art houses in the States gravitating towards some of the more commercial films. Are these long-term trends? I doubt it, but who knows what the long-term trends are going to be. But I think the audience, as having not found programs they want to attend, is both a problem and it's over. No, it's a problem and it's an opportunity. And this session that we've been working on this week, thanks to your Europa Cinema, I think is going to help us solve that problem of figuring out what kind of programs people want. So thank you very much.
Okay, so groups, you know who you are. You have time until 12:10. Then it's they have to work on the questions that we started after the session about sales agents, new distribution models, cooperations between exhibitors and distribution or sales agents. Again, please nominate one representative who's going to do the reporting after the work that you will do. It's not a